Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. If you want to let those outside the door know, because the commish is here with his staff, we want to make sure we start on time and end on time for your CE hours. Y'all heard me, didn't you? All right, I'm Deborah Gisriel. I'm your past president of the Oregon Association of Realtors and wear of several hats, so I'm not going to bore you with that, but it's my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce to you our new, not quite new anymore, almost a year or 6 months, our new Oregon Real Estate Agency Commissioner, Steve Strode, who is a former realtor and past president of the Oregon Association of Realtors, so he really brings a great perspective to his role. And I really don't think he needs much of an introduction. You all know him well. And we think I serve on their board, so I have the distinct pleasure of serving with these folks and working with them. And I can tell you the real estate agency is in fantastic hands and with amazing staff. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve. I don't get to do anything else. I am done for the whole convention. So please welcome Steve Strode.
Thank you, Deborah. Well, thanks for having us here today. I think I know most everybody in the room, but for those of you who don't, Deborah gave you a brief intro. I started this position in February, and before that, last year I was current past president of OAR, last year's president, and did sell real estate for about 18 years, 8 of which was in Wisconsin and 10 years in Oregon. And I served on a bunch of roles at NAR and things like that too. So I'd like to thank you all for letting us be here today. And I'd like to introduce my leadership team. And to my left, we've got Anna Higley, Deputy Commissioner of Administration. Let's see, we have Maddie Alvarado, Customer Service Manager. Michael Hannafin, Land Division Manager. And Selena Barnes, Deputy Commissioner for Regulation and Policy. So just a few quick comments before we get to our panel. They've each got a presentation for you. One of my favorite takeaways over this past year has been a reminder that our long-held assumptions or convictions may sometimes be really simply not true. And when you recognize that, sometimes doors open for you. And so yeah, sometimes being wrong is really wonderful. And my case in point with that is last year at prior Commissioner Bentley's retirement, I was reintroduced to Selena, and the person who introduced me said, kind of like did a nudge, nudge, wink, wink, why don't you apply for the commissioner job? And my initial reaction was like, oh, heck no, I'm not gonna work in Salem, I'm not gonna work in state government, I'm not gonna work for a regulatory agency, like big yawn. And I'm happy to report that all of that was 100% off the mark. So first, there's a genuine welcome for new agency directors that come from the private sector. So that was a eye-opening experience for me. They want the perspective of folks that come from the private sector in state service. And then also to acclimate, we're given a learning partner who has experience in executive service. And mine actually worked for the real estate agency for a number of years, and now she's a deputy commissioner at a very large agency. So I had a good introduction that way. And another key takeaway that I found in my role is that after meeting colleagues from other regulatory agencies, both in real estate and other professions, and just doing tons of reading, I'm really convinced we're in good hands here in Oregon. We have a good model. I've walked into a well-run agency with really good systems in place and really good staff. So that's what I walked into. And here's an example, I think, of where we're in good shape. In Oregon, you and the industry are very empowered to make yourselves the best you can be in terms of like education, continuing education, things like that. So with the exception of LARC, the industry has the ability to design your CE courses really to fit your licensees best. You can be nimble and adapt to a rapidly changing industry. And Jenny's in the back of the room under her leadership. I know you're doing great things with your own CE efforts through the association. I heard great things about the Principal Broker Academy that was launched this year. Those are the things that add to your value proposition. And because of our model in Oregon, you've got the ability to do that and get continuing education credits for that. So that's a great model. So does that mean we're on autopilot? Absolutely not. We are not on autopilot. My team will be talking to you about what we're working on now and what we're working on in the near future. And with your help, we'll serve our industry better. We'll serve our mission better. And here's just one quick example. We're all talking about it. Thinking advertising rules. We know they're woefully out of date. Our advertising rules don't match the social media generation. So that's an example of what we need to work on. We all know that. So without talking any further, I'd like to introduce Anna Higley, our first speaker. And thank you, Anna. At the end, if you could save questions and answers till the end, and then we also have a quick video we'll show after the presentations, and then we'll get to Q&A. So thank you, and thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to put this here. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me? I'm not super mic familiar. Is that good? Okay. So my name is Anna Higley. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Administration. And before I get into what that means, I'd like to take you through a little bit of my background and how I came to this position. I first joined the agency in 2008. The Willamette University's MBA program brought me to Salem. From there, I took on a short-term project with the real estate agency. The position was just a short, maybe 2-3 month project where I went through some business process redesign for accounting procedures, and then I was gone. I actually transferred from Willamette and went on to the University of Washington's graduate accounting program to get all my credits to sit for the CPA. And just as I was sitting down, getting ready to start studying for the exam, I got a call from the real estate agency asking if I'd like to do another project with them. So weighing my options, I was like, okay, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And it turned out that that project was the e-license program, and I became the project manager, and I do not have a CPA and don't know how to do taxes or accounting or anything. But I took all the classes for it. So we ended up launching the e-license system in 2012. After that, I worked at the Department of Administrative Services, where I launched statewide projects. I came back to the agency in 2014, where I launched the upgraded version of e-license. Am I on the right place? Oh, thanks. You got my clicker? Okay, thank you. Where was I at? Yeah, we launched the upgraded version of eLicense, which is the program that we're on today. In 2016, I joined the management team, and just a couple of months ago in July, I joined Selena Barnes as the co-deputy role, just under Steve Strode, Commissioner Strode. Okay. So back to what I do at the agency. My role is to act as the Chief Operating Officer. I direct all business functions through the Administrative Services Division, and I also manage the managers of the standalone programs of education and licensing and land development. Now, Maddie and Mike are here today. I'm going to let them get into the weeds of those program areas and be more specific about this administrative services part. And I also want to give you some context of what our business is like, given that we're working as a state agency. So a few important high-level points. Thank you. This is a kind of a hard setup. So a few important high-level points, if you aren't already aware. The real estate agency is a freestanding licensing and regulatory agency. Therefore, we don't operate under a greater licensing umbrella with multiple professions. The real estate commissioner reports directly to the governor. Also, our entire budget is called other funds. So that means we don't draw from the general fund. We don't take lottery dollars. There's a million other fund types. We don't use any of those. You pay our bills with your licensing fees, and those fees are dedicated to our agency exclusively. I know there's a misconception. People think that that can be sloughed over to the general fund, and that is not the case. So even though we are a freestanding agency, we do operate within the constraints and rules of state government, with accountability to the governor and the legislature. We follow statewide policy set forth by the Department of Administrative Services, and we work under the oversight of the Oregon State Chief Information Office for IT policy and major IT projects. We also work directly with the state treasury as our bank. They hold all of our funds and negotiate all of our banking functions. And we also work with the Secretary of State on audits where they're auditing our adherence to statewide policy, and they also hold our records at the Secretary of State Archives Division. Can you slide? Okay. Now this slide shows our entire agency by division, but I want to drill down a little bit and talk more about the team that I work with and tell you about what's on our roadmap. So directly under me, I have a team of 6 that support administrative functions. Leandra Hagedorn assists the agency with all board activities. She also coordinates the affirmative action plan for the agency, and she performs special projects for the agency like the charitable fund drive. Russ Patinsiv is our e-license specialist. If you have been one of the unfortunate few that maybe hit a script error while you're going through a renewal or there's a bug, something's not working, he's the one that's going to work with our vendor to get that resolved, hopefully very quickly for you. Tiffany Miller is our systems administrator, and she supports the entire agency with all IT systems, and she's often front and center on all IT-related projects for the agency. Michelle Heyman is our communications coordinator. She's responsible for our web content as well as is the editor of the Oregon Real Estate News Journal. Katie Carriel is our agency fiscal analyst. She performs all accounting functions for the agency, and she helps us with our budget process. And then finally, we have Denise Lewis on loan from Selena's group in regulations. She's acting as an online complaint coordinator. Okay, slide. What you've all been waiting for. What's next? I'll start with the online complaint. Our current system has the functionality built in to do a complaint online, but we're not using it yet. It needs some configuration work, probably some code changes, which means some money, and a lot of testing to get this ready for end users. But I'm really pleased to see this project moving forward because it can create some major efficiencies in the regulations division. Currently, we have one person, one FTE, that spends about 20 hours a week, half of her time, hand entering information that we get in a PDF on a complaint form into the e-license system. So by moving an online complaint module forward, it completely eliminates that data entry function. Also, it's going to be easier for the consumer, right? They can access it online, submit all the information, come back and add information if necessary, and then check the status of that complaint, again, anytime online. We're hoping to launch this project within the next 6 months. Another major project that we're working toward is getting our land development filings online. And like the online complaint, this is great. It helps us reduce that data entry, but there's a way bigger benefit here. And this is the last remaining area in our agency where we receive money through the mail because it's attached to a paper condominium filing form. When we receive money through the door, we have to follow a series of very redundant steps, but necessary steps to ensure accounting controls are in place. So when we convert those payments to the online portal, we lower the risk, as then no payment information of any kind would be housed within our agency. With the efficiency gained and the lowered risk, this makes this a very high priority for the priority project for the agency. And then finally on our roadmap, this one is nearest and dearest to my heart, the licensing and regulatory software replacement system. We intend to begin that next biennium. So that's the 21-23 biennium. And the e-license system is actually, believe it or not, becoming end of life. So we'll have to replace that system. But I did have the opportunity to attend a regulatory conference last month and see a lot of products from vendors that are in this space. And I can tell you there's just some really exciting things out there, especially for those of you that are managing a business with multiple logins, hard to track, and it's going to simplify. So we're on that. Another thing I'm seeing is improved notifications for the licensing system, things like text opt-in, if you'd prefer text message notification for a renewal, let's say, or unlocking a password. So overall, I'm seeing products that are easier to navigate, better tools, more modern. So yes, e-license is becoming end of life, and it's time to replace it. I will be building a stakeholder group when we launch this project. If any of you in particular have just a bone to pick with the way something in e-license works, you really like licensing systems and software, you're my person. Stop by after this presentation, give me your card. I will keep you in the loop. You'll be able to see the product that we end up choosing and maybe even weigh in on some requirements that you'd like to see. So with that, I will pass it over to Michael to talk about his work in land development.
All right, good afternoon. It's nice to be here with you. My name is Michael Hannafin. I'm the Land Development Division Manager. Let me get my slide up. I'm already there, I guess. So in any event, just really quickly about me. I'm a real estate attorney. I've been a member of the Oregon State Bar for the last 16 years. I'm also a JAG officer in the Oregon Army National Guard for the last 10 years. And for those who don't know, that's a military attorney. So it's kind of boring in and out of uniform. But in any event, the value added here is that as a real estate attorney, the Land Development Division overall, the way that we're different from the other divisions within the agency is we aren't geared or focused on licensure and enforcement. Our focus is interests in land. So, for example, condominiums, which takes up the vast majority of our time. I mean, it's our meat and potatoes. We do review and approval for this type of project. All of the condominiums in the state of Oregon flow through our office when they're created. We review the declaration, the bylaws, the plat, the title report, exceptions to title, and a specific type of unit sales agreement that's required for the first sale of a residential condominium, and a couple of other things. But the point of all that is, so it's consumer protection, which is something we have in common with the other divisions. So that when the purchaser moves into their unit, that condo sort of behaves the way they would expect it to. No surprises, essentially. And this is sort of a common theme. Before I move on, there's some additional benefits to having this process, especially condos, move through at the state level. The county performs a concurrent review of the plat. While we look at everything, they look at the plat. And the good news is that Multnomah County gets about 90% of the condos in the state. I mean, it's easily a lion's share. They know what they're doing at Multnomah County. And their surveyor's office, we co-present annually trainings for other surveyors in the state on how to review a condominium plat. But the point is, some of these other small counties, they may never have had a condo. So when they first get one filed, they're kind of out at sea trying to figure out how to evaluate this plat and sort of reading into Chapter 100, which is the chapter that governs, and we can help them with that. So it creates sort of a common frame of reference, which is actually, I think, beneficial to the developer and to the consumer. And so there's just consistency there. We also regulate timeshares. The review here is similar to a condominium in the sense that we look at, the foundational documents, including the title report, exceptions to title. Frequently, a timeshare is built on top of a condo, so we would also be looking at the declaration and bylaws and recorded documents for that condo. We're just trying to understand how it's structured. At the end of this process, and this also applies to condominiums, I'm going to just call a mulligan here. With condominiums, if it's a residential condominium, at the end of that process, the real estate agency is going to issue a disclosure statement, which is kind of like, if you haven't seen one, like the owner's manual for a car. It gives you some idea of what the project structure is and what your responsibilities might be. Similarly, with the condominium, we issue the public report, which is analogous to that. It's just sort of an overview of the project. The reality is there are very few condominiums developed in Oregon, right? They're not homegrown. This one here is Disney Aulani Vacation, something like that. I pulled it off the web, but Disney's, they've got theirs. They're almost all in Hawaii. Yeah, it's pretty much probably not. In any event, selling into the state is real estate activity, so we keep an eye on this. Subdivisions. This is a legacy thing. We do not regulate subdivisions generally. And this kind of is a holdover from about 1975, prior to the land use planning system that we use now, that, the local government didn't take a close look at the recording of plats. And so that was actually done at the state level. And we still have this stuff on the books. So we're looking for provision of all the utilities. We look at any encumbrances on a title. We look at the whole thing. At the end of that process, we issue a public report. And until then, they couldn't sell. Modernly, every jurisdiction out there has, a validated land use planning document, at which point they can simply impose their local regulation and record the subdivision plat. So we don't need to see it. That's an exemption. The only ones that we do see now every year or two is we'll see one from out of state. So if it's an out of state subdivision and they want to sell into Oregon, we actually look at it. We'll do that same old school review on it, and we have to go out and kick dirt on it too. So they can't just tell us it's a certain way. We'll actually travel and take a look at it before we let them sell into Oregon. Membership campgrounds. Just quickly on this one, if you don't know, this is actually a thing in Oregon. A membership campground is defined as it's a membership camping contract that allows for 30 days or more of a right or license to camp somewhere. It's that simple. There are two pieces to this from the agency's point of view. The piece that I handle in the Land Development Division is registration of the campground contract itself. And like the other things that we check on, I'm checking on status of title, some other things, but essentially we're looking to ensure that the provider of that contract has the wherewithal to fulfill their end of the deal. So there's that. And then the other side of this is with Maddie, who will be following me here, licensing division, is that if a person wants to sell one of these contracts as a salesperson or membership campground contract broker, they need to register to do so with the agency. This doesn't really concern you, though, because there's an exemption for brokers and principal brokers. So if anybody was getting alarmed, there's no issue there. And then this last piece here, it has to do primarily with condominiums. It obviously doesn't say that here. For those of you that were here for the legislative brief, the brief on the last session here with Sean Jillians a couple minutes ago, I'm sorry, we're going to cover some of the same material. We're going to do it faster, though, probably. I mean that in a totally complimentary way. Not throwing shade on the guy. So in any event, so House Bill 2001 is the missing middle housing bill. And it's designed to enhance, infill development. And what it does is it allows people to build duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, townhomes, or cottage clusters on a lot. So this doesn't provide for division of land, right? It's multiple dwelling units on a lot. So it doesn't say that there, but I'm going to touch on this here. I'm going to go through this timeline here, and I'm going to tell you why this may be interesting to you for your own business looking forward. It's interesting to us because it implicates a jump in condominium filings and condominiums in the state as a result of this bill. And I'm just going to kind of walk through the applicable timeline here. So these first two bubbles are actually reversed. The first one I'm going to talk about is this one here, the 1st of January of next year. And at that point, cities of 2,500 or more, or counties of 15,000 or more, so essentially the whole state, they can no longer require, when they're permitting development of an ADU, they can no longer require development of off-street parking. Okay, so that's one part of it. The other part of it is they can no longer require that it be owner-occupied. So the obvious intent here is to push for development of more ADUs to kind of free that process up. So there's that. That's sort of our short-term hit that I think, from our point of view, will lead to sort of a fairly quick bump in filings. December 31st is next date. This is a date upon which the Land Conservation Development Commission, or LCDC, will have stood up a model middle housing ordinance. So they'll have that done, and that matters because then on June 30 of 2021, cities of 10,000 or more and less than 25,000 must have stood up their own conforming middle housing ordinance, or they have to apply LCDC's ordinance. And then the following date here, this has to do with Portland Metro. Essentially, cities of 25,000 or more, or cities or counties that fall within a metropolitan service district, must have their own ordinance set up or follow the model middle housing ordinance from LCDC. There's an exception here for cities of 1,000 or less, so there must be one of those in Portland Metro. If anybody knows that, I'll actually take that answer after. Say it again? Maywood Park. All right, thank you. There's the answer we were wondering about. In any event, between these, over the next couple of years, we do anticipate a fair uptick in business for condominium development. And so, just to allude back to what Anna was saying about our roadmap, there is definitely some value to find additional efficiencies in the land development division by taking it online. That's pretty much it. And with that, I'll be followed by Maddie Alvarado. Thank you.
So my name's Maddie Alvarado, and I am the Education and Licensing Manager at the agency. And my background is quite a bit different than my colleagues. So after completing the business and technology program just for my local community college, I got hired in with the Oregon Health Plan as an eligibility worker. And about 9 months in, I realized that it was really depressing work, and I wanted to find something else to do. So I found a promotional opportunity with the Oregon Building Codes. And I went there and I worked as a lead worker for their licensing division. And about 2 years later, I found another promotional opportunity with the Oregon Real Estate Agency. And it was as a licensing specialist there. And so when I began 10.5 years ago, I thought, oh, I'm going to be there 2 years tops and move on to something else. And that hasn't happened. So really, it's because the real estate agency, once I got in there, I loved the people I worked with. I really developed a passion for this industry. So much so that a year ago, I got my broker's license. So now I cannot conduct or engage in any professional activity, but I'll tell you that the education piece has been so valuable. And there's a connection now that I have with our applicants who are calling in because, I mean, I remember going through the process and being really frustrated too. So I can sympathize with you guys. So anyhow, just to tag on to my experience, earlier this year, the City of Salem Council and Mayor Chuck Bennett appointed me to the Housing Advisory Committee. And so this is still a new role for me, but I'm really excited to not only serve the City of Salem, but support city leaders. And it's also really important to me that I stay current on the housing markets and, not only that, various issues that are affecting, I'm sorry, I'm out of breath a little bit. So various issues that are affecting not only our city, but our state as well. And so this new role really enables me to do so. So moving on to our sections programs, I provide oversight not only to the licensing and education programs, but also the client trust account reviews. Have any of you ever had to do one of those yet? Okay, so our team is now reviewing those. We have 3 compliance specialists and 2 administrative specialists. And so when you contact the agency, whether it's via telephone call or email, our team is going to be your first point of contact. So we also take the first pass at any compliance-related issues. And then if it's necessary, we will elevate it over to Selena's team and regulations. So right now, our compliance specialists are working on the compliance or the client trust account reviews and then background reviews for new applicants. How many of you are principal brokers in here? Quite a few of you. And how many of you have experienced lag time with your background reviews? I'm so sorry. So I do want to mention this while I'm here. This is not our fault. It's Oregon State Police. Blame them. No, they're actually converting over to a new system right now, and so we're really at their mercy. And sometimes they come back and they say, oh, it's the FBI, but they are running at about 2, even 3 weeks, and you will see extensive wait times when you have applicants that are coming from out of state, so don't be surprised about that. If it's somebody in state, just average 2 weeks. If they're out of state, it's going to be longer. So I wanted to mention that really quick. So not only are they only processing the CTAs and doing the background reviews, but they're also answering calls in between. And then right now we have our administrative specialists who are working on all the application types. So those are the registered business name applications, the branch office registrations, name change applications, and then they also answer calls in between. And what they also do, for many of you who've probably called the agency, realize they also provide a low-level kind of technical support through e-license. So when you're going through it and you get hung up transferring that person, they're going to be the ones to help you walk through that. And then each year, our team also processes the escrow renewals in June. But before an escrow company can actually renew, we have to receive their financial documents and their annual report. So when we receive their annual report, what we're looking at is, has their amount of business increased? And we've seen a lot of increase over the last few years. And then they have to increase, well, typically, most of them will have to increase their bond amount. So our team is making sure, okay, have they actually increased their bond amount to where it needs to be? And if not, they're not eligible to renew June 1st. And it's the same thing with their financial documents. If we don't receive those from those escrow companies, they are not eligible to renew. And for them, it's hard. They don't have an expiration or a grace period where if a licensee, you can renew late, they have to start the whole process over again, and that's a massive beast. So not only are we doing the escrow renewals too, we're also doing the real estate marketing organization renewals in June. How many of you know what those are? Okay, so those are the people who are cold calling and saying, hey, we see this on Zillow. Do you want to sell your house? I got a guy over here who can help you out with that. So those are those real estate marketing organizations. And in the state of Oregon, we have 5. So just to kind of give you an idea, there's not that many of them, but they may have a lot of staff that they employ. And so then finally, our most important duty that really our team prides itself on the most is providing customer service, excellent customer service. So, and it truly is our highest priority. Our team averages 2,000 phone calls a month, and our average hold time is about 20 seconds. So it's fairly decent. I'm not allowed to tell you guys what other states do, but it's pretty good. So whether it's talking to a licensee or a consumer, we're really striving to just provide you always with professional, courteous service. So if you don't get that, I'll go back for feedback here in a minute, and you guys can talk to me afterwards. So upcoming projects. Okay, we have 2 big ones coming up. So before July of 2020, our agency is going to be reviewing the broker, principal broker, and property manager state portions of the exam. So the first thing that the agency is going to do is we'll be creating, Commissioner Strode will be creating a committee created with various people and with various experience. So we're going to be looking for subject matter experts who, are part of residential, commercial, industrial. We're also going to want regulators and educators to participate in this, and also who practice throughout various areas of the state of Oregon. And then the second thing will be that the committee will be reviewing and editing existing test items. So you guys are going to be, or the committee, will be looking at questions that are scoring poorly. They're going to be looking at, when you take or sit for an exam, PSI gives the applicants an opportunity to leave feedback on those questions. So if they say, oh, it wasn't worded correctly or something was funny, we're going to be reading all those comments and then looking at those questions. And then finally, what they'll be doing is also creating new testing questions. And then what we'll do is we'll submit all of those to PSI for republication. But before PSI can implement the new testing questions, they will have to be pre-tested first. So those changes won't be immediate. Okay. And our second big project is going to be mandatory educator reviews. And so this is going to include pre-licensing, post-licensing, and continuing education providers. And the objective is to really ensure that the providers are ensuring that they're adhering to the record requirements, that the class topics are correctly classified. And then this is a big one. The agency wants to make sure that all the pre- and post-licensing education courses match the exact courses that we approved. So if they're offering it online, sometimes it's been reported to us, and we'll compare it, and we'll say, oh, it's not quite the course that we approved. So we'll be looking for that. And then also ensuring that all timers are auditable and verifiable. So those are kind of on my roadmap. And those reviews will be conducted by the compliance staff within our team as well. So this is the part where I want to say that I really do welcome your feedback. I really enjoy having one-on-one conversations with licensees, and sometimes I've been known to get carried away and I can have like a 30 or 45-minute conversation with you guys. So I'm sorry if you've been one of those people. But I do enjoy it, and that's how I learn. I learn from you guys as well. And then also, if you have any concerns about an experience you've had with any of our staff, please feel free at any time to pick up the phone and call me. I'm always available. And then I also wanted to mention, have any of you ever taken our survey that we have, customer service survey? So any communication that we send, there's a little blurb at the bottom of the emails, and it provides a customer service survey. And we really appreciate receiving that feedback because, it's really valuable, and we're able to, it helps us to identify areas that we can make improvement, whether it's the quality of our service, the efficiency, or the reliability. So we're just looking for ways that we can really make our improvements. So thank you.
Okay, I'm Selena Barnes. For those who haven't met me before, I think a lot of you I've seen before. And let me get to me. I'm going to be a little brief. I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for question and answers. You've got a captive audience up here, and I think you probably have some things you want to ask some people. But Steve did tell me I had to tell you a little bit about myself first. So to give you kind of my background, I started in law enforcement. With that, I spent over 4 years as a detective investigating sex crimes, child abuse, and homicide. At the time that my son was about to be born, I quickly realized that there wasn't anyone that I knew that I trusted that could watch him, and it was time to leave and hang up that gun. So I moved over to the regulatory section instead and started working for the state. I started at the Construction Contractors Board as an investigator, running their regional investigator program. Came to the agency in 2002 as an investigator, went to licensing manager, regulations manager in 2008, and was fortunate enough to join Anna as a deputy commissioner this past summer. My role as deputy commissioner is not only to oversee all of our regulatory functions for the agency, but also to make sure that all of our policy and law development is getting handled and set forth. So that's me in a nutshell. All right, let me tell you a little bit about my staff, just so you know. Everyone else has gotten to talk about theirs. I have 2 compliance coordinators. Basically, think of them as like lead workers. They're the ones who are going to direct the investigators as they're conducting their investigations, assist them, coach them, whatever that case may be. They're going to review all the incoming complaints that are coming in for jurisdiction, those kinds of things, and see where the next best path for that is. They review all completed cases to ensure that our investigators have covered everything that they need to, and we have all the information that we need so that I can make a decision on how that case is going to move forward. Some of the other things that they do right now, Rob Pierce, I'm trying to combine names, he's not Robert Hewitt. Rob Pierce is working on our escrow audit process, revamping that, as well as Deanna coordinates and looks at whenever Maddie's staff has worked on a client trust account review and there's issues, either they're not coming into compliance or potential money missing. She's directing those investigations with our staff as well. I'm pleased to announce we have 8 investigator auditors. That's as of this week. We just hired 2, came on board earlier this week, so they're starting into our in-house training program. So we're finally fully staffed again for a little bit. Nice spot to be in. They're the ones who, if a complaint is filed against you, they're going to be the ones who are doing all the interviews, collecting all the evidence, gathering documents from various places, and then compile all of that into a comprehensive report that then makes it easy for us to make decisions as far as, is there violations, and if so, what should we do about it? Our compliance specialist, I have one. She's the one who writes all of our legal documents, our final orders, our notices of intent. Think of a notice of intent kind of as a legal charging document that comes out to you saying, these are the violations we've identified, and this is what the agency intends to do about it as far as a sanction. So moving on, I don't have real estate experience beyond purchasing a house in the past, rentals, that kind of thing. But I have staff that do, as well as we have Steve Strode, who helps to direct us with some of that as well. I have on staff with our investigators people who have been a real estate broker, a principal broker, property manager, someone who's worked in escrow before. I also have staff who have been auditors in other agencies or other fields, whether it's auditing financial institutions or mortgage brokers. Have people with degrees in accounting, also business, a law degree on staff. And so with this very diverse background, you know, we do have, not all of us have the same experiences, and so we really, even if a case is assigned to one investigator, it's a team effort. They can talk to everyone else, get further information. If Steve doesn't have an answer for us, that's when we start reaching out to you or our board members or other things to say, what does this looking like for you out there so we can make decisions as we move forward with an investigation? Some of the things make sure it's catching up to me. Some of the things that I'm most proud of since I've been in charge of regulations at the agency. When I first started as an investigator, I don't think you liked us at all. There was this perception, and I have to say, probably rightly so at that point in time, that if an investigation was opened on you, the agency was out on a witch hunt. And come heck or high water, we were going to find something. And so I think that's one of the things that I bring to this, especially after having investigated things like child abuse and sex crimes. It is so important to not only either find out exactly what happened, but it can be as important to prove that something did not occur that was alleged as it is to prove that or identify violations. So that's the attitude that we have. As I talk to people now, I'm not hearing those same feedback. I think that when anyone is approached, no one wants to be a subject of an investigation, but I think everyone at this point is feeling like they were treated professionally with respect and that we're going to do the best job that we can moving forward. Pardon me. With that, I've had the extreme pleasure to come and, for instance, like talk to you for the last several years at your conference, to come out and do classes such as the do's and don'ts. And quite frankly, that's where I get a lot of fulfillment as well, because you actually smile at me. You don't smile at me when you come to visit with me otherwise. And so, but it helps. And during those times, whether it's talking during breaks or questions that are asked, these are the times where we find out a lot of what's going on in the industry, because unfortunately our agency is very reactionary. We're not, you guys are all doing a lot of things. Your industry is changing as technology grows, and we're always a step behind. For instance, we don't find out about things if there's a new trend that maybe isn't a good trend going on until complaints start coming in. And it's already been going on for a while out in the real world where you are. Our laws and rules, it's such a long process to get those updated that we recognize, and as Steve mentioned, you know, advertising is one that, and I saw you all nodding earlier, you're doing it again. Advertising is one that needs to be updated as well. Technology has changed. Our advertising rules have not kept up with that as far as social media and all of that. Things like virtual offices, there's a lot that we need to address. And so Steve and I have been talking that we've got some plans to move these forward. As we do, we're going to be listening to you to find out what should be addressed, try and get ahead of some of these things or catch up first, as well as then we'll be having stakeholder work groups and things as we're actually working on language for that. So if you're interested in any of those, please let Steve know, let myself know that, you know, you have a big stake in that. We'll be happy to tap on your shoulder and make you work for us a little bit. All right, the last thing I want to say on our accomplishments is on our investigation timeframes. One of the things we have to report to the legislature on is key performance measures. We call them KPMs. And one that we have in the regulations section Formerly, it was we had to complete 60% of our cases within 150 days. Through this we've been increasing that incrementally as far as how we've been doing. This last year, when it went through the legislative session, we had done so well with it that they increased our goal, moved the bar up on us to move it to 80% of our cases to be completed within 150 days. And I'm very pleased to say right now we're hitting at 91%. So we want to keep that going. Yes. Now, there are those cases that I got to tell you are way outside that mark, but we're working on it. All right. So what's coming up for regulations? I talked a little bit about that Rob was working on revamping our escrow audit process. We have the statutory authority to go out and do escrow audits. This hasn't been done in a number of years, simply because we didn't have the staffing resources to do that. Our caseload would have been even further behind. We're sitting at a good spot right now. We're wanting to get those done. So that is coming. We're expecting to be starting those the first of the year. The online complaint filing that Anna talked about is going to be tremendous for us. It's kind of our first major step in moving regulations to paperless. It's kind of a scary thought for me. Anna's pulling me along. We're going to get there. If you've seen my office, you'll know why it's scary. Thirdly, we want to, as I said, work on our laws and rules, get those aligned better to keep up with what you are doing out there in the industry and how the marketplace is working. And then the fourth one is to continue to increase our engagement with you, the feedback back and forth, so that we're not only working out for consumers and making sure that they're protected, but our other part of our goal is to make sure that it's a level playing field for all of you. So that is what I have. We do have a short video that they're going to get started here for you. Basically, this is a video. We've had a article in our Orange A. How many of you are subscribed to the Orange A? Yay. Do you go to my page first? Yep. All right. All right. So with that, we've got a video about final agency acknowledgement that is available out on our website as well. And then I'm going to turn it over to Steve after the video for question and answer. Thank you.
do you think? To start? All right. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left for question and answers. So we've got some mics at the front table, and I offered to be a mic runner. And Margaret has a question. I never would have guessed that.
So I attended the legal panel at the last meeting, and Jack Graham was there. What a pleasure to see Jack again, which indicates how old I am. But he said something that really caught my ear. He said that when he was deputy commissioner, he issued several sanctions regarding brokers who wrote up offers and closed them and had never stepped foot on the property. I didn't realize that was part of licensing law, but boy, I sure hope it is. I guess it's really for this one's for Selena.
All right, is this on? No. It's not. I'm loud. Okay.
Here, this one's on.
Thank you. Basically, it doesn't specifically state that, but for instance, if you are marketing a property and you have misinformation or you can't verify that the information you are giving when you're marketing it is accurate, that's where we're going to go. So it doesn't specifically state, broker, thou shalt go step foot on the property. We're going to be going at it from a different avenue. And quite frankly, we just don't get many complaints about that in quite a number of years for directly that.
Well, I think we just opened the door, didn't we? Close the broker.
All right, so our inbox is going to be filled.
Well, and this is an example where things do vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Just like the terminology we used on that video, we know the industry uses different terminology, day-to-day practice. It's not in statute. So that's an example. And I came from a jurisdiction originally where that was a requirement. You had to set foot on the property before you listed it. So that, those ideas do permeate in other jurisdictions as well. But we have more of a standard of care type thing. Let's go here and then back here.
Hi. My question's about, I know you're talking about updating advertising rules, and I'm a managing principal broker, and I struggle with how to review Facebook advertising as a principal broker, especially somebody just spontaneously does a video at the open house on their personal page that I have no foresight or knowledge about.
I think I'm going to get stuck with this one because when Selena teaches her class, she's like, doesn't go on Facebook, right? Do you want to take it or should I?
I can. How many of you struggle, especially if you, for principal brokers, struggle with the fact that, for instance, if you have a broker who's doing blogs or sending out a bunch of information all the time, all that is marketing, all that is advertising. Thou shalt review it before it goes out. Are you overwhelmed? Okay, so that's one of the things that we have definitely recognized, that with social media and how fast things are moving, our law doesn't really address that right now and give you a good path to deal with that. And so that's one of the things that, as we're looking at the advertising rule, that's going to get wrapped up into that as well because we are archaic and you guys are light years ahead of us.
So I don't know if this is a real estate agency question or a state legislature question, but my understanding is that for us to do a comparable market analysis, we need a license for starters, and second, it needs to be in the course of trying to obtain a listing, and that we also need a license to give professional real estate advice. So I've been wondering for years why the portals, I won't name them, are allowed to give a estimate on price and not be licensed by the state of Oregon.
All right, I'm going to stand up again.
That's why I got quiet.
Yeah. So most of that falls under, you have a carved out exception in our laws that allows you to do that. Most of that is falling as far as pricing of properties. The actual, that's going to fall under the appraisal law, appraisers board, as far as putting prices on. So I don't know, I haven't heard from the appraisers board and asked them how that is occurring. You are allowed to do it under those specific circumstances because they've allowed us to have that in our laws to carve out that ability for you to do so. So that would fall under the appraiser's board.
I really enjoyed the video. It was kind of fun to watch, but it created a couple of questions for me in when you had the two agents in the same office, and it's talking about how we should disclose on the final agency, and you've got that managing broker, which we all know is a disclosed limited agent. Are we supposed to put that somewhere in the paperwork? I guess would be the question there, even though everybody explains it when they talk about agency. The second part was for that team, where you've got a buyer's agent on the team and a seller's agent on the team. How can it said on the video they were each exclusive to their side of the transaction, and yet that team theoretically knows everything about what's going on when they start out as seller representation? How can we divide the team into, oh, you're on this side and you're on that side, and we're not going to talk to each other about what's going on our sides, type of thing? You see where I'm going with that? Can you clarify that?
Sure. When I said captive audience, I meant all of us, okay? So basically on the final agency acknowledgement, you've got ORF forms where there's been, a lot of things put on there. What the law specifically states is that if you are a licensee representing the seller, and another licensee in the same office is representing the buyer, the law specifically states that you are each representing your client exclusively. So that's why it says that, and there's that little disclaimer, I don't remember the exact language, but basically says something about, the principal broker may be the disclosed limited agent, that kind of thing. So that's why that's like that. With the team and group, basically, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, that it was put up here. What you would have to do, whoever is in charge of that team or group, if they are going to allow both different people from the same team to represent different clients, they're going to have to, within their team, put that firewall up of keeping information separate from who's representing the seller and who's representing the buyer, and then you've got a principal broker somewhere overseeing it all. So, yeah, it is a little simplistic, and I can see where that would be confusing.
So what I hear you saying is it boils down to maybe company policy. If my company says, if you're all on the same team, you're disclosed limited agents, then that's what it is.
If you're not separating it out to where I'm representing one and Anna's representing the other client, you have to have the firewalls in place, just like you would if there's two brokers in the same office, whether there's a team or a group or not, to keep that information from each other separate.
We've got a question back here too. And just keep in mind too, when you talk about ORF, the state does not produce forms. That's a separate company, a separate entity. So, we don't control how those forms are created. That's a whole separate business. So I think sometimes people think that we create those forms and we don't.
Hi, this has actually been bothering me for some time. I've been doing real estate, I like to say, since the turn of the century. And as a new agent, it was pretty much beat into me. I was also a GRI, and Phil Karen, I think his name, an attorney who worked very closely with Scott Taylor, a former commissioner, on this Oregon Real Estate Agency disclosure pamphlet. They were very, very careful because the biggest liability is, in fact, agency relationship, is full disclosure that there's any kind of conflict of interest. So an agent is, in fact, a sub-agent of the principal agent. You cannot separate yourself from the principal agent. The reason that we mark disclosed limited agency is to disclose to that buyer and to that seller that there is some form of conflict of interest. It's the principal agent that is the disclosed limited agent. So yes, we represent our buyer, and yes, we represent our seller, but not exclusively. And on page 1 of the final agency acknowledgement, that's the box that you have changed, and you've written into the real estate journal that we're to mark when two agents are under the same principal brokerage, which clearly conflicts with the documents that we give our clients as disclosure. And I did bring those documents, and we could read them out loud together. I think it's very clear.
And I have seen the documents. What I'm telling you is what the law states, not just specifically what the document states. That's another one that Steve and I have talked about that needs to be at some point addressed, but it's how it is currently written that we're working under.
I just talked to Jack, the attorney from the other class, and he agrees with me, and he will be following up with you as well.
Okay, that's great.
Excellent.
And we're at 4:15 now. I saw a couple hands. Are they briefer questions? All right. I saw John Hoop, so that one I know I'm going to.
Okay, so I'm not sure exactly whether this fall under advertising or how it goes, but it's going to be coming up because there are a lot of teams. And on a team that goes out, and I'm not talking about a selling person on it and a listing person within the team. I'm talking about where they go out and let's say they show a house. The agent on the other end does not know that they are a showing agent because nothing identifies them as that. And then it maybe goes into a sale mode, and then there's somebody else on it that writes up the offer, which is puzzling when you get it on the other side. And then next thing you know, a transaction coordinator who is probably licensed writes up the repair addendum. But what I'm getting at here is that there's certain roles within teams that are never disclosed to the other side. And actually, this happened to me as a seller. So there's confidentiality things that go on in between those people, and you don't know what's being said. And so I don't know if there's going to be some kind of a form down the road or something that regulates teams a little bit more strongly.
I think that's a good example of where business practices don't always align with statute, and there may not be a need to change statute, but to create better education among a different business model that's out there. Because I think in many cases what Jan was talking about, we already cover it in statute.
Yeah, and what I would say on that, sometimes we hear about things that you tell us are going out there in the industry, but we never see an example. We don't get complaints on it. So we don't really get an opportunity to really look at it, see what's going on, and be able to determine should laws and rules be changed or that kind of thing too. So I hope that, if you're seeing issues out there, either send it in to us so we can look at it, or join some of the work groups and bring those kinds of things up when we're trying to update our laws and rules.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. John, let's do one last question. I think we wrap it up, and we can stay longer as well. But for the purpose of the class, we'll let you all go. John.
Thank you guys for coming. John Hoops from the Eugene Association of Realtors. So Michael, and I'm going to let you get your breath, Salinas, and ask Michael a question. So Michael, we haven't built a condominium building in Lane County since the Tate was built in like 06 or something like that. But I'm hoping with the with 2001, we'll start seeing more condos around the state. So I haven't seen a form of the new sale agreement in a long time. If we start seeing more condominium developments, is there sort of a template sale agreement? Is that part of the declaration? Are they all going to be unique? Does that make any sense?
So that's a good question. The unit sales agreement requirements are actually in a statute in Chapter 100. It's 100, 480 or something. The bottom line is it has certain elements to it, and in the sort of the description of the unit, it's all a little bit different than a standard RF form. If you have questions about that, if you're selling a condo unit, all. For the first time, and it's a residential unit. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it. So with that caveat, if you have a question or you're in that situation, all of our phone numbers, all the managers' phone numbers, our contact information is on our website. Call me. I'll scan and send you a template that somebody else had developed that we'd already approved, so you have sort of a good starting point for that. Typically, with a condominium unit, what will happen is the attorney provides that as part of that filing package. So when you get to the point where you're ready to sell, they'll have a pre-flighted one that's been approved by the agency, and that'll be what you run with. And so it would be in the developer's hands before you get to the point of sale. Maybe you're talking about if you are the developer.
More concern from our side if we're going to start seeing like 4 different new building sale agreements.
Right. It sort of follows a pattern, but the developer should have that at the time when they're going to sell it. We will have approved one, a specific one for that condo. So they should have it. If they don't, do call me. I'll answer any questions about condos. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today. Thanks for the opportunity to have us here. And I know there's way more questions than we've got time for, so reach out. Thank you.